welcome to meeting number 106 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room or remotely using Zoom.
No, the usual drill. Why public health authorities have not demanded that we wear masks. It's advisable. There are about 6 very, very bad viruses wandering around, so I would just ask you to please wear them if you can. And I'd like to take the opportunity to say that you cannot actually take photographs of whatever is going on in the committee or on the screen. They will be available later on online if you wish to. Just one caution: the room is equipped with a very powerful audio system. Please be very careful when you are speaking into the microphone that you remove anything that might do feedback or cause a sort of blip that will offend the ears of the interpreters. So now, every question or any statements should go through the chair. And so we begin. Today, we're meeting with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation to talk about job cuts announced by CBC Radio-Canada. Witnesses today are Catherine Tate, President and CEO, Barbara Williams, Executive Vice President of CBC, Danny Melul, Executive Vice President, Radio-Canada, Marco Dubé, Chief Transformation Officer and Executive Vice President, People and Culture. Ms. Tate, you must proceed with your opening statement for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. I welcome the opportunity to talk with you today about the financial pressures facing CBC Radio-Canada, but given the committee's motion, I would like to address the issue of bonuses first. For the record, CBC Radio-Canada does not award so-called bonuses. What we have, like every other Crown corporation, is at-risk or performance pay, which is a key part of the total compensation of our non-union staff, about 1,140 employees. We benchmark that compensation against the middle range of pay for similar positions across the government and the industry. This at-risk pay is held back until the end of the fiscal year, and it is calculated based on the individual's performance and the corporation's performance. These specific measurements are linked to our annual business plan, including targets like revenue and reach and engagement across all of our services. Our board of directors reviews and approves these targets at the beginning of the year, and we report quarterly on our progress in our public documents. Government departments and Crowns all have performance pay. It helps us deliver on key objectives and helps us stretch to meet ambitious goals. Over the past year, on multiple occasions, members of parliamentary committees have asked other organizations about so-called bonuses. I will tell you what they told you. Incentive pay is a part of total compensation, and the administration of compensation, like other human resources matters, remains the responsibility of the organization and its board of directors, which operates at arm's length from government. Those decisions will be made after the close of the fiscal year. Permettez-moi maintenant de revenir.
Let me now turn to the serious structural challenges CBC Radio-Canada faces. Shortly after I became President and CEO in 2018, I alerted our employees and the government, including the Minister of Finance, about the compounding annual structural deficit we face because of 2 factors outside of our control: inflation on goods and services and declines in television subscription and advertising revenues.
That structural deficit was $21 million per year. Today, it is $36 million. What this means practically is that we start each year with cuts to our budget. Unlike the private sector, we cannot manage fluctuations through loans or bridge financing. We must balance our budget each and every year. Over the 3 years of the pandemic, as revenues plummeted, most media companies had to lay off staff. We shifted resources to maintain services and to protect jobs. And we benefited from $21 million in additional government funding for each of the past 3 years. But today, our ability to shift resources and find savings is no longer sufficient to meet the growing deficit. Comme tous les médias, nous sommes confrontés.
Like all media, we face rising costs of operations and production, and declines in revenue, especially in the Quebec market. In addition, we are facing an additional 3.3% cut to our appropriation as part of the government's cost-saving effort, along with the end to the $21 million.
These factors contribute to a shortfall of $125 million for next fiscal year. We alerted the government to our financial challenge last summer. We notified our employees in October. And in December, we announced that if our financial situation doesn't improve, we will need to cut approximately 800 positions, along with $40 million in independent production spending. We recognize the uncertainty and worry this creates for our employees and for Canadians who depend on our services. We will manage these cuts in a way that minimizes the effects on jobs and the services we provide. And if our financial picture improves, we will adjust. But as I have said many times, the public broadcaster faces chronic underfunding. Compared to other public broadcasters around the world, we serve the largest country across 6 time zones in 2 official languages and 8 Indigenous languages. And yet, at $33 per Canadian, a dime a day, CBC Radio-Canada is one of the worst-funded public broadcasters in the world, with 4 times less funding than the UK and France, and 8 times less funding than Germany. Until that situation changes, we must continue to manage with what we have and do our very best to stretch limited resources to meet our mandate. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tate. And now we're going to go to this part of the program or of the meeting where we're going to have questions and answers. The first round is a 6-minute round. And I begin with the Conservatives for 6 minutes. Ms. Thomas, Rachel Thomas. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Ms. Tate, thank you for giving us your time today. We much appreciate it. In your opening remarks, one of the statements that you made is that that, of course, you outlined some challenges that the CBC faces. I should also outline, though, that every other media outlet in this country doesn't start off with $1.4 billion taxpayer dollars at the start of the year. So while you might look to, play a bit of a card there in terms of poor me, let's start off with the fact, and that is, compared to other outlets in this country that are conducting themselves to perform at a higher standard than the CBC in many ways, they're not starting off with that. So I think that's an important point that needs to be acknowledged right off the bat. Ms. Tate, we're here to talk about job cuts and bonuses, or you prefer to call them performance awards. And so my first question for you is, you've had 2 months to think on it. Of course, you were asked during an interview on national news, in fact, the CBC National, you were asked whether or not bonuses would be considered for executives. And you said it wasn't ruled out, essentially. And so having 2 months to think about it, have you come to a conclusion? Will there be bonuses for the executives within CBC?
Thank you for the question. I just want to clarify the reality of the obligations of the public broadcaster. Of course, we have the privilege of a very, very generous parliamentary allocation, which, by the way, has not substantially increased in over 30 years. And during that time, we have added to traditional and radio, traditional television and radio, with digital services on all platforms. So we're operating with the same budget that we had 30 years ago. And where we get the same pressure as our colleagues in the private sector is from, in fact, the third of our budget that we earn in commercial revenues, which are absolutely vulnerable to the vagaries of the market. And that's the place where we have challenges.
Ms. Tate, in the interest of time, could you please answer my second question? My question, there wasn't actually two, there's just one. Perfect. If you could answer it, thank you.
So to the question of performance pay, as I have said in my remarks, the performance pay is a critical part of total compensation.
My question was just whether or not you would be giving it. Will you be giving bonuses to executives?
My response to that question is to say that we have a process, a rigorous process. It is not my decision to award performance pay. It is, in fact, the decision of the board of directors, and that decision comes at the end of the fiscal year. We have another 2 months before we reach the end of the fiscal year. And as I have also said in public, everything is on the table. So we will see at the end of fiscal year, based on results and where we are financially.
So as the CEO, you do not make the decision. You have no say in whether or not bonuses are granted.
All of the management team measures and analyzes our results on an annual basis, which are published very clearly in our
CEO,
in the quarterly
you have no
reports.
say in whether or not bonuses are given.
All of the management team presents to the board of directors the results of our year against KPIs, key performance indicators that have been tracked throughout the year, and based on the analysis and the results, the board of directors makes its decision. I should just point out, perhaps of interest, for example, last year, we did not meet 2 of our KPIs, and our bonus level
I'll go to my
was
next
reduced.
question now. I realize that you'll do your best to talk out the clock, so I'll just kind of keep us going along here. My next question is this. Those KPIs, would you table those with this committee?
They're public in our annual report.
Perfect. Thank you. Based on the metrics that are used then, last year, you gave out $16 million in taxpayer-funded bonuses to the staff. That was an average of $14,000 to staff members at the CBC. Most Canadians don't even see half of that in a bonus, not even a quarter of that in a yearly bonus. $14,000 was the average amount that was given to CBC staff. What were the metrics that were used in order to determine that bonus amount?
So again, the KPIs are published, and they're very clearly have to do with performance of the service, for example, digital reach, for example, engagement with news in the regions, for example, performance on engagement with kids and children. All of those are published very clearly in our annual report. And I actually want to, if I may I ask, I think your number is wrong. If I want to correct the record.
I would just highlight for you that it's interesting to me because you're saying that these are the metrics, but actually the viewership of the CBC is cut in half since you took leadership in 2018. It's come down by half. So it's interesting to me that you're giving bonuses or performance awards when in fact the CBC is performing the poorest it's ever performed. So bonuses keep going up, they keep skyrocketing, but performance, as you say, the bonuses are granted based on.
I really, if I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to correct the record. If I may correct the record.
Ms. Tate, my question for you, for 2023, will you be given a bonus?
I would like to correct the record, if I may, Madam Chair. First of all, I don't believe the number was 16 million in last year. I'm going to ask Marco Dubé, who manages the people in culture at our company, to correct the error that the member has stated.
Sorry, Madam Chair, through you, I do have a question on the table, and that is, Ms. Tate, for 2023, will you be given a bonus?
I'm going to come back to your question after he corrects the record.
Madam Chair, I would ask you, through you, Madam Chair, the witness knows that her instructions here are to answer the questions that have been given.
Have 27
She can correct
seconds.
the record by sending in a written notice if she wishes.
You can do that, Ms. Tate. In fact, you've gone over time.
My time has been interrupted numerous times because the witness doesn't want to answer my question. It's very simple. Will she be given a bonus in 2023?
It's not my decision whether I get a bonus or not. Let's just be clear.
Thank you. That's enough time. I'm going to go to the Liberals for 6 minutes. Ms. Hepner will go for 4 minutes, and then Ms. Gainey will go for 2. Lisa.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again to the team at CBC for being here to answer our questions again today. I want to pick up again with executive bonuses. I think, Ms. Tate, you spoke about the privilege really it is to run and have the stewardship of a Crown corporation, a public institution, and even more a media institution like CBC Radio-Canada, which really plays a vital part in our democracy. And I'm sure that to run such a large, complex media organization, you need really talented people behind the helm, and you need people to be there. You need to be able to attract that talent. But right now, hundreds of your colleagues are facing layoff. And so wouldn't you say that it's fair for us to ask these questions about executive compensation when so many journalists and people who do the real work that Canadians are counting on are facing the uncertainty and the instability that you mentioned in your statement?
I understand absolutely the point of view of members here. All I would say is that, as I have repeatedly, we made a public statement on this matter, everything will be on the table in due process. If we run a $1.8 billion corporation and we don't respect the processes, the rules, the directives of the board of directors, then it's chaos. We have a process in place. Performance pay is pegged against targets, and it's measured. And at the end of the fiscal year, which will be the end of March, the board of directors will decide. And we will see whether our financial situation improves. Just to be very clear, our announcement in December was an estimate, a forecast. And we were in the effort to be transparent with our employees because we were embarking on negotiations with our most important English union, the Canada Media Guild. We had to be transparent in order to be respectful of that bargaining process. So just to be clear, estimates are not actuals. We will know by the end of March where we are. The board of directors will review our performance, and they will make that decision.
Would you talk to me about how you view this issue of compensation? Should public institutions like CBC Radio-Canada be competing directly with the private sector?
Those are two different issues that you've raised.
In terms of compensation.
Executive compensation is pegged at 50% of the average. So it's not that the executives are being compensated at the level of government, and I can ask Marco to give us more detail on that.
So what we have is a short-term incentive plan, and when we're talking about competition, actually, what we need to do as a responsible organization, a public broadcaster that delivers services to all Canadians, is actually have the talent to deliver those services. Our compensation framework actually takes into account all kinds of elements. We have huge unionized population,
30 seconds.
which contracts actually provide for overtime. And for unaffiliated people, we have a short-term incentive program that is pegged against performance targets. If people achieve those targets at the end of the year, the board decides to compensate these people adequately to the mid or mean or the average of comparable positions you would find in the industry, the media industry, or other Crown organizations.
Thank you, Ms. Hepner. Anna Gainey, 2 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et merci aussi à...
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. The Broadcasting Act states that CBC must offer the same quality in English and in French and meet the needs of all official language communities, including the specific needs of minority language communities, all while meeting the needs of the different regions in Canada. What measures have you taken to ensure that the measures that you have announced are going to respect that? Thank you for the question. Our obligations for promoting and protecting the French language, well, that's at the heart of everything that we do. We respect our obligations from the CRTC, but also we respect the new Official Languages Act. We need to understand that when we're talking about CBC and Radio-Canada, and when we talk about appropriations, the percentage is not 50-50. And when we look at all of our revenue sources, it's 54% for CBC and 46% for Radio-Canada. And so it's pretty proportionate. And so when we look at the cuts at CBC Radio-Canada, our approach is to look at the two different markets, and if I can come back to this later, I will invite my colleagues to explain our approach.
That's it. I'm going to go to the next questioner, the Bloc québécois, Martin Champoux. 6 minutes, please, Martin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Bonjour.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Hello, everyone. Ms. Tate, before the holiday, we received information on the cuts, 800 jobs. 200 of those jobs were already vacant, and the rest would be shared between CBC and Radio-Canada. Were you able to reflect on this position over the holidays, and do you believe that it is the proper way to implement those changes? As I stated, we have to look at all of the cuts. Yes, we're talking about jobs, but also for independent production. At CBC, we're proposing a cut of $25 million, and for Radio-Canada, it's $15 million. And so a difference of about 20% on the cuts at Radio-Canada and CBC. And so there is a difference between the two. But apologies for cutting you off, but I don't have a lot of time and I have a lot of questions. I also want to talk about the jobs that are being cut, and I think that's what is the most concerning. There will be cuts at CBC and Radio-Canada, the same number of cuts on both sides, and there's some uncertainty about when it's going to happen, who it's going to happen to, and so it creates a climate that is very concerning. Is this a good thing, considering that things are constantly changing? We want to be transparent, and we want to share with employees the reality of our structural deficit. That's the issue that we have. We want to be open, and we want to work with our teams and find the best way to work with the budget that we have. But when you share with your team that 250 jobs are going to be cut, I don't think that shows stability or the desire to work together. Quite the opposite, in fact. I would like to focus on the difference between CBC and Radio-Canada and general television. I know that the activities are very different, but let's talk about TV and the difference of the market share, for example. As you know, CBC and Radio-Canada have very different markets, even though the funding is quite significant. So 23% for Radio-Canada and 4.4% for CBC. So that's important. The number of shows that are the most watched in Canada, how many out of 10 came from Francophone stations? 10 of 10. 9 out of 10. And of those 10, how many were produced by Radio-Canada? 6. Yes, there were 6 of them. And so it shows that in Quebec and in the Francophone areas in Canada, people are attached to it. to promote culture that needs to be protected and supported, but also because that's how Francophones and Quebecers see themselves in television. And that's different from English Canada. And American TV doesn't necessarily reflect entirely Anglophones, but it's quite different for Quebecers and Francophones. Do you take that into consideration when you make decisions like the one you are about to take and making cuts into Francophone services at Radio-Canada? Answer, yes, we do take all of this into consideration. And if we look at the market share for CBC, CTV, and Global in the Anglophone market, that represents 20% of the market. And so we know that the English market is fragmented and highly competitive. And if we look at all the services of CBC and radio, we are number one out of 22 markets. So first for CBC radio, and for digital services, we are also number one. The Francophone television services are great, and there are very few markets that have so much success, and it needs to be protected. But that's not what you're doing. Well, that's why Radio-Canada is keeping their own revenue. So 100% of it is being kept by the Radio-Canada team. I hope so. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't the perception that things are shared, whereas they keep their own revenue. Do you believe that Radio-Canada is currently sufficiently funded? And do you believe that it will be able to survive and continue to serve Quebec and Francophone areas in Canada? Do you believe that with the cuts, you'll continue to be able to offer the service?
Demander à Danny de répondre.
Melon.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Monsieur Champoux. We are very careful. We are taking the time needed to see where cuts will happen. There's programming that is coming to an end, and that's normal. There are certain shows that will not be renewed. It's important to see that inaudible.
This question. Thank you. I now go to the New Democrats. Peter Julian for 6 minutes, please, Peter.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to thank Radio-Canada and CBC for quality journalism. We talked about this on November 2nd. The importance of this in countering disinformation from the extreme right wing. And I remember on November 2nd, you hadn't talked about cuts. But now you're saying that you communicated this information to employees in October. And so, were you aware that there were going to be cuts of up to 10% when you came to the committee in November? Answer, we announced that we had a deficit for 2024-2025. We announced this to our employees in October. I talked about this issue at the Chamber of Commerce before we appeared here. It was a speech that I made on imagining the world without Radio-Canada, and so it is a concern that I had, and it was in the media. I didn't raise it at our meeting on November 2nd because we were talking about a different topic, as you might recall. Yes, but you can understand that we were shocked to hear weeks later about those cuts. Now, did you have any discussions with the federal government on the best way to support CBC Radio-Canada since then? Or since the issue of the cuts became obvious? We discuss things with the government frequently. We talk about our budget and our challenges, and we've been talking about a structural deficit for 5 years. And when I looked at this with the team and saw that we would have the issue with in 2024, 2025, I alerted the government in July. Since then, we have spoken on more than one occasion of the challenge that we have for the cut of 3.3% by the federal government. We also talked about the need to address the $125 million deficit, and so they are well aware of our issues. And I mentioned here already that the federal government is indirectly funding Meta and Google at about $1 billion a year for ads on Meta and Google, and we need better information sources, better than Meta and Google.
Issue that Ms. Thomas raised about the bonuses and give you the opportunity. I thought it was a little rude not to give you the opportunity to give us the number for last year, executive bonuses. I have some comments to make after that. What is the actual number of bonuses that were granted, or performance pay that was granted last year?
I'm going to ask Marco to answer that question.
So last year actually was under 15 million, so 14.9 million that was granted to a little more than 1,100 people, unaffiliated people who've contributed to the performance of the public broadcaster.
Okay, and you can understand then how Canadians react, how I reacted, how many of us reacted when you have a very important institution that is cutting positions that are vital for providing that information to Canadians, to tell us the stories about each other, about other regions of the country. And at the same time, we see a significant level of performance pay that is provided. Now, you had said earlier in your testimony that this is something that is decided by the Board of Directors, but given the context of these cuts, can you assure us that the recommendation would not be, given the corporation's performance and the cuts, in continuing that performance pay at a time when we really have to ensure that the resources are directed to frontline journalism and to having Canadians learn about each other?
I've made it very clear that there's a process for evaluating not just executive but managers and employees that are not unionized at CBC Radio-Canada, and that process will be respected by the team but also by the Board of Directors. And what that means is at the end of this fiscal year, which is not the year of the structural deficit, this year is balanced, they will have an opportunity to look, and we will have all the information that we need to be able to assess the financial picture for next year, at which point they will make that decision. It is not my decision, and I'm afraid I cannot reassure you of what you're looking for.
You can understand the public reaction when we see cuts in services and apprehended bonuses, or bonuses that seem at this point likely to occur. You can understand how Canadians
I can understand people's concerns. Of course I can. And I would like to also add that we have
as quick as you can, Ms. Tate.
We have a payroll of $950 million, and the executive performance pay is at $16 or $15 million. So proportionately, it's an extremely small number, and we need to keep our talented managers. It's not just journalists. We absolutely honor and want to support their work.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Tate. We'll run out of time there. And I'm going to go to a second round, and it's a 5-minute round. And I begin with the Conservative, Luc Bethol. 5 minutes, Luc.
Merci. Merci, Madame la Présidente. Bonjour, Madame Tate. Heureux de vous.
Hello, Ms. Tate. Happy to see you at committee again. Earlier, we were talking about 16 million. It's 15 million. That's still an average of around $13,000 per person. So our numbers are pretty similar. So I just wanted to specify that we weren't that far off. And this money won't be given to the jobs that are being cut. You stated earlier that there was 55% and 40% for government appropriations, 46% to Radio-Canada, but for you it's about even, so you're cutting evenly on both sides. But there's a difference, and that can represent about 25 people who wouldn't be losing their jobs at Radio-Canada. That's not our approach at all. If I may explain, each sector will look at their services and the needs of their market. We talked about 250, but that's just what we're estimating. We don't know if it'll be 250. We're hoping for an improvement. But that's what you said. And you've created those concerns for Radio-Canada employees. And when we look at the numbers, we would have expected perhaps 56. That would have been equitable according to revenue and to appropriations, but that's not the announcement that you made. Now coming back to bonuses, how many assessment criteria do you use to say whether or not there's going to be a bonus? Just a number, please. There are 2 sections in the program, an individual aspect and one that has to do with the company's goals, and those goals are reviewed every year by the board. Monsieur Dubé, I don't want to have the program explained to me. I only have 5 minutes. Ms. Tate earlier stated that bonuses were lower. How many indicators are there? There's 7. 7 for the company, and these are indicators used to measure the digital performance, radio performance. To date, how many have been met out of those 7? Currently, the fiscal year isn't over, and so we'll be able to give you that information after March 31st. Well, you have to have an idea of whether or not they're going to be met. For some of those indicators, we believe that we will be able to meet them. We still have a few months before the end of the fiscal year. We have a structural deficit that we've been facing for a while. This puts pressure on us and makes it difficult to meet our indicators, and after the fiscal year we'll be able to know. In 2022, 2023, is it true that none of your indicators were met? There were 2 that weren't met that had an impact on the amounts given to people. The incentive pay is part of compensation. Yes, Ms. Tate explained it earlier. I'm a little confused that Radio-Canada is very popular, is greatly listened to. They have a decent budget, and yet there will be cuts. A broadcaster is judged by the number of people they're able to meet, and it doesn't seem to be recognized by CBC. This year, there was a significant decrease in ads in Quebec, and that's why there were cuts at TVA, or layoffs rather at TVA. And if we look at our indicators for this year, we can see that there is a decline in ads, especially on the Francophone market. And that's the current situation this year. And so the people who are selling ads won't meet their goals.
And we're now going to the Liberals. Michael Couture. Michael, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ms. Tate, for being here today. I want to start by just saying that I think, like many people in the room, I'm a big supporter of the CBC and the work you do, and I have a lot of respect for people who work at the National Broadcast Corporation, the work they do to share information, especially in an age of disinformation and a lot of challenges that are out there in getting information to people. So I just want to start off by saying that because I think it's important, and I see the value in the organization. The challenge we have, I think, just as Canadians in general, is that the world's changed, and we're going through a bit of a rough time. From the economic downturn, post-COVID, and there are a lot of challenges out there, and a lot of companies. There's certain sectors that are being impacted in a really challenging way, especially your sector. I know that you're in a unique situation because sometimes you can compare yourself to the other broadcasters. From just say I think you compared to compensations, work they do and things like that, how they operate from that perspective. But also you're publicly funded, so sometimes you can't compare yourself to those organizations. So it's a bit of a challenge being in that situation. But tone is an important thing during these challenging times. And when Canadians see $16 million going out in bonuses, it's hard to stomach, especially when they see cuts. Usually bonuses happen when things are good. When the world's great, when the organization's feeling good, there's, things are good, we give out bonuses. That's what a bonus is. Hey, things are good, but things are not good. The $16 million represents, roughly $75,000 a year, represents 1/3 of the jobs that are being cut. 200 jobs at $75,000 is about $16 million. So it's almost 1/3 of your problem if a job was on average of $75,000. So, for us, it's hard to, just accept bonuses being paid when things are challenging. So, I know that you said that this is the board of directors and they have a set of criteria that they use, but you're the CEO. You can make a recommendation at any given moment to the board of directors. Would you consider asking the board of directors to reconsider the bonus structure at CBC?
I certainly will consider all scenarios. However, we have a program in place. First of all, these are not frivolous awards given at Christmas time. This is performance pay. And for an individual, let's say, who's making $80,000, a portion of that pay is held back. That's what performance pay is. This is not an additional amount. We have a contract, and we contract with them for that $80,000, and let's say 7 of it is held back till the end of the year. And if they perform, and if the corporation performs, they get 100% of it. If we don't meet our objectives, they get less. And that's why the middle of the year to make a decision like that would be.
It does sound very reasonable, but going back to the point, and I am sorry, I apologize for cutting off, but the time is so limited, and that's a challenge for us here in committee. But I understand that, and it does sound reasonable from a perspective when you may be making a certain amount at the lower end. Maybe would you consider those who are above the $200,000 mark to consider maybe recommending a change in structure? So I know, for example, the top tier, you can get a bonus of, I think it's 28% at about $120,000. Would you consider maybe looking at those who make over $200,000 and setting a tone that Canadians could look at and say, you know what, We agree with that. That's a reasonable approach. Would you consider, as a CEO, going back to the board of directors and saying, maybe we should consider a shift this year while things are not as good as they possibly could be?
As I said in my opening remarks, we have a process in place. We will respect the process.
That.
And to your question,
would you actually think about changing that process?
And I've said publicly that everything is on the table.
So is the answer yes? You would consider that?
Everything is on the table. At the end of the year,
that means yes, you
we will
consider
consider all our options. Yes.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And, you know, I think Canadians
You've
are
got
looking
17
for...
seconds, Michael.
Yeah, I got a few seconds, right?
Yeah.
I think Canadians are just looking for a signal that, you know, that we're willing to work with the tone of the nation at this point. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I go to Martin Champoux from the Bloc for 2.5 minutes, Martin.
Merci, ça se va très vite, 2 minutes et demie.
Thank you very much. 2.5 minutes is not very long, so I would like to come back to the last answer that I received when I said that it would be very difficult for the corporation to offer services in Quebec, and the answer that I received, that certain shows just won't be renewed. That doesn't reassure the Francophone community or Quebecers who enjoy their shows. I'm concerned for variety, and especially in the current context, about regional information. There are newspapers, daily newspapers, weekly newspapers that are struggling. Journalism is struggling. And I'm sure you're acting in good faith to say that when you say that some shows won't be renewed, but it just shows that there are other things that might be let go of as well. What will reassure Quebecers is that you say, yes, we recognize that Radio-Canada is facing a different situation than CBC and should be treated separately from the CBC in this situation. I'm not saying that services in French don't need to play their part. I'm sure the mandate will be reviewed and we'll have to re-examine the funding model. But what we want to hear right now is, how will you reassure Quebecers on their television services, their regional services in French, and the services offered by Radio-Canada? Nothing is reassuring them. You're not saying that you understand the difference. You have 30 seconds. You're not recognizing the role of Radio-Canada. I think my colleague was halfway through her answer earlier. I just want to be clear.
Madame la Présidente, je calcule qu'il me restait encore une quinzaine.
Madam Chair, I still had about 15 seconds, I believe. Do we not have the right to respond?
It's over, but that's okay. State, will you answer? Most everybody went over, so I'll let you have a very quick answer, Ms. Ballou.
J'apprécie.
Merci beaucoup. Ce que je veux vous...
What I want to say is that Radio-Canada needs to serve all Francophones in the country, and it also needs to support a media ecosystem that is fragile, especially in the regions. And so there needs to be productions from Winnipeg and from Moncton, and they need to be supported at Radio-Canada. We have the same structural deficit, and it needs to be balanced, but we made the decision to not have as many cuts.
Voilà.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Peter Julian. Peter, 2.5 minutes, please.
Mais je pense le message que...
I think that you've heard from at least 3 parties here the importance of focusing on maintaining this network throughout the country. It's essential. I hope that you'll remember after this the importance of investing in a way that will be best for Canadians. But there is a political party asking for the end of CBC, but they're also saying that Radio-Canada can survive without CBC. I believe the opposite. For example, in Vancouver, CBC and Radio-Canada are sharing a space. Journalists often come to our press conferences. They come for both networks. And so the Francophone community in Vancouver can have that information, but the sharing of resources is essential. And so my question is as follows. Is it legitimate to claim that we could eliminate the funding for CBC and Radio-Canada will still be able to thrive after the destruction of CBC? Answer. It's impossible to imagine, and that's why I gave that speech in Montreal. There is no Radio-Canada without CBC because we share our infrastructure, our buildings, our technology, the equipment, and for the administration, funding, everything is shared. We are one single entity except for programming and for the news and for decisions on TV. Those things are separate. But the infrastructure is shared. And so the answer is that if we remove CBC, there will be even more significant cuts at Radio-Canada. And so it is false to claim that as the Conservatives have claimed. Thank you.
Short sentence. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to go to Ms. Thomas for 5 minutes, please.
Ms. Tate, I just looked online, and as CEO, it is your responsibility to determine who you would recommend for bonuses and how much. You recommend that to the board, and then the board can veto you, of course, if they wish to. Now, of course, if they were to do that, it would signal that they don't have confidence in your leadership. So I think, given the fact that they've extended your contract by 18 months, they probably would take your recommendation. So I'm just curious, it's coming up in 2 months. Will you be recommending that executive bonuses are given?
I will respond to that question as I have earlier, which is to say, if we achieve the results of the current fiscal year, I will recommend that the 1,140 unaffiliated, non-unionized employees receive their fair pay, their performance pay.
Their fair pay, their bonus pay. So you will be recommending then in 2 months' time that the executives receive a bonus?
If they achieve their targets.
Okay, so you already said earlier that targets were not met in previous years, and I also looked that up online, and that is in fact true. In fact, not only there were a number of targets that weren't met, and then the vast majority of targets were only partially met, and yet still bonuses were given. So how many targets have to be met in order for bonuses to be given this year? Fully met.
So we have a system where targets can be partially met, not met, or overachieved.
Yeah.
And we go through that system. We present this to the board. The board approves at the end of the year the performance of the organization. And
how many have to be completely met in order for the bonus to be given?
Well, I would suspect that some of it have to be completely met to have...
Some of it have to be completely met? So, Ms. Tate, you're the one that gives the recommendation, so I'd like you to answer. Will your recommendation be will your recommendation be given based on some being met, 4 being met, 6 being met, 8 being met, all being met?
You understand the way it works. Let's say there are 7 performance indicators. Each one is awarded a percentage of the performance pay. So revenue, for example, is 20%. Revenue is a huge driver for the company. And so if we don't achieve revenue, we will not achieve the 20%. But that's not to say it goes to zero.
Okay.
That's what Marco is saying, that there will be a lesser amount awarded. And to your question, I very much suspect that this year we will not meet our revenue target entirely, given my comments about the Quebec market.
So, Ms. Tate, what you're telling the committee then is that the decision has been made to cut 800 jobs. That announcement came out on December 4th, right before Christmas, which is a pretty harsh time of year to make that announcement. And what you have just told this committee is that there is still an intent to give bonus pay, whether all KPIs have been met or not.
First of all, the announcement in December was an estimate forecast should our financial situation not improve, and the majority of the cuts, and it's very clearly stated in the release, if the majority of the cuts will occur in the next fiscal year. We were giving a long runway in order to be able to improve. In fact, we are very focused as a management team on improving the results and reducing the cuts to the extent we can. The longer we have to work on a problem, the greater chance we have of achieving the result.
Ms. Tate, here's a few facts. Under your leadership, trust in the media, and especially in the CBC, has declined. Fewer Canadians are watching the CBC, and in fact, viewership has been cut in half since you took over in 2018. Ad revenue has plummeted. It's decreased by 31% from 2022 to 23. And the number of CBC staff earning a six-digit salary has doubled. And then to add to that, in the last 2 years, just the last 2 years under your leadership, more than 100 correction notices have had to be issued with regards to stories put out by the CBC. In your estimation, have you met the KPIs and therefore deserve a bonus this year?
I think I said earlier, I actually am not subject to the short-term incentive plan of the rest of the corporation because
There's no performance bonus available to you?
I have a performance pay based on my objectives, which correspond obviously to the company's, but also to additional objectives
and in your estimation, have you met those metrics that are set out for you?
Absolutely, yes. What you have described are the industry trends. I do not control the number of Canadians that have left television to go online. And by the way, equal to the number declining on CBC television that you continue to report is an increase in millions that are watching GEM. So if you're measuring viewership, I think you need to look at the totality of the experience. And that is why, by the way, Madam Chair, we submitted some documents to help the committee understand the reality of the numbers. Today, only 11% of English Canadians watch television only. 23% of Francophones watch television only. In the English market, 34% of English are solely online. We're dealing with market trends, so I do not think that I or any of the management team should be evaluated on market trends.
Thank you, Ms. Tate. I think I am allowing a lot of leeway here because it's a 2-hour meeting. We have another hour to go. So I'd like to get some answers to questions. But I would like to ask the answerers, the witnesses, and the questioners to be as short as you possibly can to get the answers in. Thank you very much. I'm going to go now to the Liberals, and it's going to be Talib Muhammad.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses for being with us. Ms. Tate, I'd like to just begin. I mean, I think you're sensing a bit of a theme here in terms of the questions folks have been asking with respect to the bonuses. And you know, I've been in your position before as a CEO where I've had to deal with cuts and then ask the question about whether or not management and others should receive bonuses. I guess one of the things that may be worthwhile just putting on the table here is that I think there is a bit of a sense that perhaps the way in which the comment that you made was received is perhaps more of the problem than what you were trying to say. I think most reasonable people would understand that the way that bonuses work is based on criteria being met or not being met. And I think what people heard you say is that it doesn't matter that cuts are happening, we may still give people bonuses. And I think it came off for some people as callous and cold, and perhaps, I'm hoping, not what you were trying to say. And I don't think, based on the answers you've given today, is that what you were trying to say. But I think, just for the avoidance of doubt, because my colleague from the Conservative Party didn't give you the chance to respond, just for avoidance of doubt, do you get to decide who gets bonuses or not?
No, not solely me, no.
So it's the board of directors that decides, right?
I beg your pardon? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sure, the board of directors makes that decision, is that right?
They make that decision based on the data that we present to them, yes.
So if the corporation were in a difficult financial position, and some of your executives had met most of their criteria, what would you recommend in that situation to your board?
I think that the reality is, when we know where we are, we will respond accordingly. I think it's premature to be talking about performance pay when, one, we're not even at the end of the fiscal year, and two, we actually don't know what our financial situation will be for the next year. I would just point out that since my announcement on December 4th, we heard that there would be additional funding from Bill C-18 for CBC Radio-Canada. That will have an impact as we plan for the coming year. So we run a very, very complex organization, and we are vulnerable to all the vagaries of the market. I am very hopeful that our situation will improve, that advertising revenues will come up, and we will be able to meet all of our obligations and be able to reduce the impact on programming and on employees.
So I guess, I'm really pleased to hear my Conservative colleagues concerned about the fate of employees at CBC Radio-Canada, which would be a rare thing given their desire to cut the whole thing. So I want to lean in on this a little bit. One of the things that those of us who care deeply about the CBC would, I think, want to know is, how do you make sure that you can get the best of the best to work for the corporation and stay with the corporation? Granted, performance pay is one of those things, and I think we all understand that. But how do you make sure that this is an environment, this is a place in which employees want to work at the CBC at a time when there's public scrutiny, at a time when there's competitive tensions? But how do we make sure, and how do you make sure that CBC is able to attract and retain the best talent to produce the content that Canadians deserve?
Well, it's a number of factors, and I thank you for that question. One is, most of the people, and certainly all of the people at this table, are here because of public service. Most of us left private media to come and work at the public broadcaster because we care deeply. And we care deeply, by the way, about our employees. And so part of it is we're here for the mission. And I think if you'd ask any CBCer and any Radio-Canadien, they'll say the same thing. I care deeply about the mission. But you also have to understand that we operate in a competitive business marketplace. And even here in Ottawa, people can get other jobs. So if we're not at least, and this is what we peg, if we're not at least at 50% of what the average compensation might be, we're not going to retain the talent. And we've seen that in the past. We have retention issues when we don't pay competitively. We do exit surveys, and the number 2 reason for people leaving CBC Radio-Canada, number 1 is, I got a new opportunity, and number 2 is, the salary is not competitive.
Thank you very much. 7 seconds to go.
Thank you.
Mr. New Mohammed, a quick word? No? You good?
No, how many seconds to go, sorry?
7 seconds. Well, it's now 4.
I will, thank you, Ms. Tate.
Now we go to a third round, and for the Conservatives, Luc Bethold for 5 minutes. Luc.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tate. I was looking at the annual report, and I was trying to find your 7 key KPIs. And there were sections with multiple indicators. It's quite difficult to navigate. There are green dots, partially green dots, And so there are more than 7 criteria. There are 23, in fact, that are in the 7 main criteria to decide whether or not there will be bonuses. This is what I was trying to get to earlier. And unfortunately, most of those criteria have not been entirely met. And so it's hard to understand in the current circumstances why CBC Radio-Canada decided to continue going forward when performance is not great. We saw it with ads, regardless of the context. Even private companies are facing this issue, and in a lot of private companies, when goals are not met, we don't receive a bonus. And so how do you justify to Canadians, if you're cutting 800 jobs, that you will recognize partial performance, even though many will be losing their jobs? Firstly, in the annual report, we have the indicators for CBC and Radio-Canada together, and then we split them, and then we have the performance indicators for Radio-Canada and for CBC separately. It's not 23. They're the same, but we put them together and we have them separately as well. Secondly, we're talking about next year. For this year, 2023-2024, which ends in March. So we have a balanced budget. We don't have that problem for this year. We're talking about the fiscal year of 2024-2025, and that's why it's premature to look at the results for the oncoming year. But the bonuses will be based on the results of this year. These are bonuses for next year? Is that what you're saying? No. For the performance pay, that's for the past year. Okay, we're understanding each other. I understand that there are different criteria, and there are certain criteria under a general point, and so we can partially meet these indicators, and I find that a little bit strange. I was able to talk with Radio-Canada employees who are very concerned, and they're concerned because they heard that 250 of them will be losing their job. But they don't know when, they don't know which sector will be touched, or how many employees have decided to leave Radio-Canada since that announcement. Since we made the announcement in December, we have sent out about 100 notices for layoffs, a few more at CBC than at Radio-Canada. And that's where we're at currently. And have people decided to leave after seeing the CBC results or the situation since the announcement? Every year, there are about 250 people who leave voluntarily, 200 that retire. We have 200 vacant positions, but I agree, our employees are concerned. They understand that a broadcaster receives funding and they're facing a long-term structural deficit. It's an issue that was never solved. So in 10 seconds, because I don't have a lot of time, Ms. Tate, would it not be good to ask upper management to give up their performance pay? If we end up there at the end of the year, it's a possibility. Everything's on the table, even the incentive pay.
Thank you, Mr. Berthold. We go to Andrew Dillon for the Liberals. 5 minutes, Andrew.
Merci à nos témoins d'être ici aujourd'hui.
Thank you to the witnesses for being with us. In December 2023, CBC Radio-Canada talked about a budget decrease of about $25 million. My first question for you is, what is the proportion of the cuts for the English and French services? What are the factors that were taken into consideration as well for that? Are we talking about this year? I'm not sure I understood your question. I apologize. I wanted to know if you could tell us if these cuts are shared equally. No. As I mentioned, for Radio-Canada, it will be $15 million on independent production and $25 million for CBC, even though the number of jobs, and I want to specify this again, this is an estimate. And so if we receive additional funding or if there's an improvement in our results, then we will make adjustments. Thank you. What proportion of the budget cuts will be borne by radio, television, and digital services respectively? Please explain. I do not have those details, unfortunately.
Excusez-moi, on n'a pas ce...
Apologies, we don't have those details right now. I don't have any other questions. I will share my time with Ms. Hefner.
Perhaps, Ms. Tate, you can send it to us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dillon, my colleague. Ms. Tate, I wanted to ask you about your knowledge in respect to your position as chair of the Global Task Force for Public Media. So you've sort of got your finger on the pulse of what's going on around the world. And I know that at the BBC, which is one of the most trusted and successful, I think creatively successful media companies in the world, they faced deep cuts, and I think they saw the end of their independent funding. And I'm wondering if you could tell us what we can learn from their experience.
Well, they have faced a lot of pressure, financial pressure, just like us. And I would say from my experience around the world, pretty well every public broadcaster is facing the same pressure. It's not a unique situation to CBC Radio-Canada. We have a crisis in the media sector. People have turned from traditional media and towards the digital giants, and that is fundamentally undermining the financial health of the private media and also our own ability to keep Canadians' consumers attached to our services. In the case of the BBC, they started at such a level that even for us, when we look at their cuts, it seems like, honestly, it doesn't seem like they should be complaining. But it is serious because they are a leading public broadcaster. But just to give you an idea, Tim Davie, the CEO of, or the managing director of BBC, told me that they're investing $1 billion a year in digital. $1 billion a year. We have nowhere near that amount of money. So it's just the proportionality is so out of sync. All I would say is, if you believe that the fight against disinformation is something that touches all Canadians, regardless of political stripe, the public broadcaster remains the single most effective tool that we have as Canadians to combat this disinformation. We are the only national media company in the country.
So is there any way to have a BBC at that quality and level without spending billions of dollars?
I say it's nothing short of a miracle what we deliver with the limited amount of money that we have. 2 languages, 6 time zones, 8 Indigenous languages, television, radio, digital, streaming, audio. It's spectacular, the work that we do, and we could be more present in more communities. CBC is not serving 35 communities in English Canada with populations of over 50,000 people. I'm thinking Sarnia, I'm thinking Red Deer, I'm thinking Medicine Hat, I'm thinking Sault Ste. Marie. All of those cities have no CBC presence, not one journalist.
Thank you. To Mr. Shampoo for 2.5 minutes, please, Martin.
Madame Tate, à l'automne, quand vous avez...
Ms. Tate, in the fall, when you appeared before the committee, you announced the 800 jobs that were going to be cut at the CBC and Radio-Canada, and it created some uncertainty. But you're saying this year is fine. We're talking about provisions for next year. And I'm wondering if you are trying to pressure the government so that you don't have to cut those jobs at CBC and Radio-Canada next year. That's quite a cynical question. But if I can be quite clear, we started negotiations with the Canadian Media Guild on October 16th. In the rules of negotiations with unions, we have to be transparent because we want to end the negotiations in February. And so if I arrive in April and we say there will be cuts, when we just finished negotiations with such an important union, well, you know, it's a legal case. And what would the impact be if the finance minister decided to not go through with the cuts of 3.3%? What would the impact be on your decision? It would help us. And what else would you need to help CBC and Radio-Canada to not make cuts to your services and services in French? We would need more funding from the government and an improvement in commercial revenue. Will you give up the $7 million that Google has put on the table for C18? Will CBC Radio-Canada give up the 7%? Why? Because it's $7 million that would allow small media and small newspapers to grow, and it would be different than for CBC Radio-Canada. I just mentioned that there are 35 cities, Anglo cities in Quebec that don't have journalists, but those are choices made by the CBC. It's a matter of resources. There was $2.5 million that was saved on our travel budget, and we hired last year 16 journalists, one in Lethbridge, one in Craigbrook, one in Grand Prairie. And so as soon as we have the funding, we invest.
Over time on Martin's time here, guys. So, Martin, let's kind of, I'm letting everybody go because we've got about 45 minutes left in this meeting. So, I mean, we're not cutting the clock as finely as we could, but still, if I'm going to let Martin go almost a minute over time, I'm going to have to let everybody else go almost. So let's hope people still try very hard to be crisp and say what they have to say in a shorter period of time. Okay, so we now go to Julian. Peter, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I certainly agree with the point you've made, Ms. Tate, about the issue of disinformation and hate. We've seen the far right and their massive propaganda infrastructure, Fox Entertainment, Meta, that allows through their algorithms this tragic growth in toxic hate in all of its forms. Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, all those toxic forms of hate. So we need to have an institution like CBC that provides that balance and provides for the real information to counter the far-right disinformation that is washing over North America. I note that a couple of things. First off, the massive subsidies, $1 billion a year that go to Meta and Google when they have not been responsible in any way in being a voice to counter this hate and disinformation. So my first question is, do you feel it's appropriate that the federal government subsidize so massively and directly by subsidizing the advertising on for Meta and Google? And then secondly, you've mentioned growth of digital services. You mentioned the streaming services, Jem. I'd like you to take the opportunity to talk more about the budget that you have in terms of digital and streaming services and what the results have been, both to promote digital resources. You flagged the BBC, and promoting streaming services like Jem. What have the results been?
On your first question, I don't feel it's appropriate for me to comment on government policy with respect to Google and Meta. I can only really speak to how the public broadcaster responds in a world where digital giants are more and more taking the air out of the ecosystem. With respect to, I'm going to actually invite Barb Williams, who hasn't had a chance to speak, because some of the most interesting digital results that we saw during the pandemic actually stemmed from CBC. So Barb, would you like to describe how, maybe take the example of the National and how people are watching the National today?
Say it through the chair, please, Ms. Williams.
Sure.
I beg your pardon.
Thank you. Absolutely. We've had some really interesting and I think very important success digitally with all of our CBC, both news and entertainment programming. What Catherine's referring to specifically on the National is I think a lot of people may note that the actual TV viewing of the National every night at 10 on the CBC main channel has been down. In fact, there's maybe only 300,000 on average that watch it on the CBC main channel. Another few 100,000 watch it on CBC News Network, which is another television offering. And another 450,000 views happen of the National every day on YouTube. And another 40,000 watch it on Explore, our streaming channel. And another 50,000 watch it on Gem and the news app. And when you put it all together night after night, what you are seeing is that the attention paid to the National by Canadians is 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 million, depending on the night. And that is significant and valid and really important that that information is being shared. And a lot of that is happening the next morning, because morning is now the new prime time. This is all part of what is the shifting and fragmentation and rediscovery of content with new behaviors.
You beat Martin's record, Peter, on your thing.
Je peux continuer.
No, the Conservatives. Andrew Scheer, Mr. Scheer, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we can probably agree on some metrics that reasonable people would use to measure the success of a broadcasting corporation. Would you agree that measuring viewership or ratings is a reasonable metric to measure the success of a broadcaster?
Is one metric, so is usership.
Yeah, one metric.
Yeah.
I would say it's an important metric when you're talking about a broadcaster. You said a few minutes ago that ad revenue was I think you used the word, a major driver of whether or not you judge success. So would ad revenue also be a reasonable measure of success for a broadcaster?
It would be one of the variables, yes.
Right, okay. So viewership, yes. Ad revenue, yes. Trust also, whether or not people can trust what they're seeing on TV, especially when you run news outlets, you would agree, I hope, that trust in media would also be a measure of success.
Absolutely.
Okay. And therefore errors would be another measure of success or failure. If there aren't a lot of errors, and that would be a good thing. If there are a lot of errors, that would be a bad thing. Would you agree on that?
Well, I actually would put a different a response on error. I think error is a natural part of all journalism, and in the fact that CBC Radio-Canada post its corrections as quickly as we do is actually a demonstration of why we are trusted, unlike others who may not.
Wow.
So I would say that that's a trusted source.
Wow. So the speed with which you correct your errors is the way that you measure performance at the CBC. Okay. Well, so we've agreed that viewership is an important metric. We've agreed that ad revenue is an important metric, trust as well. So fewer Canadians are watching the CBC than ever before. Viewership has plummeted to half of what it was when you became CEO in 2018. Ad revenue has also crashed. In fact, it was down 31% in just 1 year, 2022 to 2023. And trust in media, and especially in the CBC, has also declined. The NDP talk about misinformation. The CBC has had to issue more than 100 corrections to grave errors in reporting, and that obviously has an impact on trust. So given the fact that on all these important metrics that you've agreed on, what justification do you have to issuing performance awards?
I want to correct a couple of your points, if I may, Madam Chair. First of all, the 30% drop in revenue was between an Olympics year and a non-Olympics year. And in fact, in the years you're describing, we had 2 Olympic Games. And so we have a much higher level of revenue, ad revenue, during those years. So that explains the drop there.
Okay, so were ad revenues in 2023 higher than in 2022?
I would say they were flat.
They're flat, okay.
Yeah, and that is, by the way, very much part of what's going on in the industry. Television is in decline, not just at CBC, at CTV and Global. Television is in decline, and people are moving to streaming, and they're moving to their connected television.
With all due respect, the CBC has almost $500 million in real estate holdings across the country. Big fancy buildings in downtowns across the country. You get over $1 billion in taxpayers' money to be a television broadcaster, radio broadcaster. When those metrics are down, how do you justify giving performance awards to people whose job it is to increase viewership, to increase ad revenue, to increase trust?
Madam Chair, if I may, I don't agree with the premise.
You don't agree that
no, I don't agree with the premise. 79% of Canadians say that it is important for the country to have a public broadcaster like CBC Radio-Canada. 82% say...
Who commissioned that poll?
Those are our public perception surveys that we conduct.
Oh, you conducted, okay.
But
so your polling tells you that Canadians like what you're doing.
By using a third-party léger survey firm.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. If the argument is to try to say that we're no longer of value, all I would say is that's not what I hear from Canadians.
What I'm asking about is the bonuses. With all due respect, Ms. Tate, when you give someone a bonus, and we've just agreed on the metrics that should be used to judge a broadcaster, when those metrics are down, how do you justify giving people, executives, big bonuses when they haven't achieved success by these metrics that we've agreed on?
As I pointed out, the metrics that we measure are public and tracked, and they're in all of our reports. So I'm afraid to say that that trust is down. Trust is down across the entire media section, and it also affects politicians. It also affects
when
all
you
of
misrepresent the truth, it does affect the politicians.
Excuse me, the time is up. But at the same time, I wish that we would stop talking over each other. If someone asks a question, we should listen. If someone's going to give an answer, we should listen. So anyway, the time is up, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I now go to Michael Coteau for 5 minutes. Michael.
Thank you so much. You know, the comments made by the member opposite around the 100 corrections, to me that just says that you're a good media source that if there is a change in the news, you issue a correction. I think that's good policy, and I wish more media actually issued corrections because that's a sign of good news. In regards to viewership, there is no question that Ms. Williams' numbers, the data that they provided, yes, TV. The fact is, TV has declined, but viewership has increased. Like I watch CBC through my Google Cast. Like I ask it, what's the news today, and CBC comes on. On my television, it's through YouTube, tech giants, but it's delivered in many different forms. Sometimes I just go directly to the website. So I can't imagine the impression rate has declined in any way. It's actually increased. My question, though, and so I just wanted to say that because I think there's a false narrative that's constantly projected out there by conservatives that CBC is on a decline. It's not, and we know that. So I don't think we even need to argue that point anymore. They're talking about television, okay? A technology that was popular in the 1960s to the 2000s. It's in a decline, like many of their policies. But I'd like to ask a question. I'd like to ask a question around, I want to ask a question on behalf of the children of Canada, okay? Because you play a huge role. I was just thinking, I wrote down The Friendly Giant, today's special, Mr. Dress Up, The Magic School Bus, all these great shows that I remember, me seeing some of them, but my kids seeing some of them. It's incredible what CBC kids do. I want you I'd like to ask a question on behalf of the children of this country. What is CBC doing for them? And what is part of your strategy to help children in this country when it comes to good content and media?
It's a great question. When I joined CBC, Radio-Canada, I had the distinct privilege of being part of the team that greenlit CBC Kids News. Real news by real kids. And a year later, on a lancé mon actu.
A year later,
where kids are learning about the news, media literacy. When you ask, what do I say about kids? Get smart about digital. Understand what it is to identify fake news and disinformation. And that's what Kids News and Mon Actualité Image, we call it, do for Canadian kids. And in addition, all sorts of programming still on television. But I got to be honest, the kids are watching on GEM and they're watching on their devices. But the reality is we have fabulous shows, and oftentimes CBC and Radio-Canada co-finance kids programs. So honestly, and we deliver our programming and archives to kids in classrooms through a platform called Curio. And that platform is educational, and the programs and the archives are designed to help kids understand the world they live in.
Children are part of your mandate,
Absolutely.
and they are a big part of your stakeholder base.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate that. I'm going to turn the rest. Do we have any more time?
You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Do you want it?
Sure.
Yeah?
Lisa.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks again. We've been talking a lot about misinformation and disinformation being spread, and I'm wondering how difficult is it for the CBC to manage stuff that we've even heard in this committee today? When we hear the viewership metric being misrepresented, right? And we're hearing the ad numbers being misrepresented. We've heard the leader of the opposition say he's going to take over the CBC building on Front Street and turn it into housing. I think that's the only reason we would have heard anything about CBC real estate today. Would you respond to how difficult it is as a public broadcaster to have elected officials at your throats all the time?
I will speak on behalf of not only my management team, but the entire 7,500 people that work at CBC Radio-Canada. It is extremely difficult to not have the love and the support for the work that we do. However, we continue to do it because we believe that serving Canadians, English and French and Indigenous, is worth it. It is a pillar of our democracy, and everything that we do is exactly to your point, to combat disinformation. It's why we have something on our website that's called Get the Facts. When somebody says something that's inaccurate, we correct it. It is absolutely critical that Canadians can count on us. We saw the numbers during the COVID years. 25 million Canadians were visiting our digital sites because they knew they could depend on us. And we, as I said before, we are the only service, coast to coast to coast. We're running transmission towers, hundreds of them, across the north. Without CBC, you lose that connectivity, which is essential to our democracy and to our sense of belonging and social cohesion in this country.
Thank you. That's it, Lisa. Now, I'm just going to see what the committee thinks. We have until the 27 minutes after 6 hard stop. Do you want to go another round, or are you good? You good? You don't want to go another round? Well, then I would. You know what you're supposed to do.
You want to go another round, Chair?
Oh, you want to go another round? Okay, then, good. So I will begin the 4th round. It's going to be Marilyn Gladue for 5 minutes. Marilyn?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. I have actually worked for many corporations as an executive, so I'm very acquainted with performance awards that have an individual performance portion and a corporate performance portion. And so you've indicated already, Ms. Tate, that in the individual's contracts, their employment contracts, their performance awards are part of that. And so I would assume that that means if they perform this year, that they are going to receive that portion of the bonus, certainly. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then on the corporate portion, I would be surprised if you were 10 months into your fiscal year and you didn't have an idea of whether or not you were on track to meet your targets. So I guess the question would be, are you on track to meet your targets?
We are on track to meet most of our targets. I indicated that we are down in revenue.
Okay. And so that will mean that some portion of the corporate performance award should be awarded.
Some portion will be awarded, but some portion will not.
All right. And for your own compensation, you have a performance award that's not on the same formula, but it's closely linked, you said, to the performance of the corporation. So if the corporation is, good on some metrics, but not on all, then you would be somewhere in the range of $124,000 if you're at the lowest end of the salary spectrum, and $145,880 if you're at the top of your range. So where do you expect to be within that range?
I'm not sure where you came up with those numbers, but I assume it's from the public website?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, just to be clear, if the board of directors makes a recommendation based on our performance, they will do so to the government. That goes into Privy Council Office and PMO. What I end up with has really nothing to do. It has something to do with how I've performed, but there is a whole other pool of people, other GICs, other deputy ministers, and other factors that will play. So it's not predictable in that regard. It's not. I can say what the board might recommend, and what I hope they would recommend based on my performance, but it isn't really, at the end of the day, even their decision. It's the government's decision.
Very good. I have a question as well about the cuts to the employees. And so the original mandate for CBC was to provide Canadian content, especially across the country, even in areas that are rural and remote, and it wouldn't be economical normally to do that. And so with respect to the cuts that are being made, what % of those will impact on rural and remote communities?
As I said earlier, we are still very much in the planning process of determining that, and hopefully we will not have to implement all of the cuts that we projected. When we worked with our teams, we made it very clear that the filter number one for us was proximity. We know that is the force of the public broadcaster, is our proximity to our audiences, especially in the regions. So we asked managers to ensure that that would remain a priority. Similarly,
sorry, I have limited time.
Yes.
Do you have a percentage maybe of
at this point, we don't, because we're still working on our numbers, but all I can say, I can reassure you that we have kept the regions as a priority.
Thank you. The other question that I would have then has to do with when I worked for a company and times were tough, they did actually cancel bonuses, and I think you heard the sentiment here today that that might be something to consider. But the other way to get at it is to increase revenue, and so I know you talked about GEM and the success of GEM. How many paid subscribers do you have to GEM?
We don't give that information out publicly.
Okay. Well, let me ask a different question. So if the public taxpayers are funding CBC to the tune of $1.4 billion, why do Canadians then have to pay on top of that for a streaming service from CBC?
The logic of that is that we have costs associated with all of these additional programs, such as GEM, Tout.TV, and if we offer the service for free to any Canadian that wants to watch it, the paid version is without advertising.
And if you could comment on your KPIs for this year, you said that you were going to meet some of them, but not all of them. Which ones, other than the ad revenue that you've already said is down?
I think we have run out of time.
Sorry,
so perhaps
thank you.
When another person asks a question, if somebody could throw that answer in, that would be great. So I go to Mr. Nur Mohammed Talib for the Liberals. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for continuing to stick with this. I wanted to come back to you, Ms. Tate, and talk a little bit about CBC GEM. And I think one of the things that we've heard over the course of the last little while is that while conservatives will make assertions that the CBC is less popular, that it's not as, the viewership isn't there, and so that's their justification for gutting it or killing it, that in fact you have lines of business and you have lines of service to Canadians that are going quite well. And so maybe we could just take a brief moment, talk about something positive, and you can share with us which lines of business are actually growing for CBC and why they're actually important for us as we think about as we think about the role of the CBC, the mandate of the CBC as will be done independent of government, and most importantly, why Parliament should keep funding the CBC in these areas.
Thank you. Madam Chair, may I pass the question to Ms. Williams?
Yes, Ms. Williams, please.
Thank you. We do have many lines of business at the CBC that are very successful, and I'll highlight a few. GEM, for sure, is a powerful streaming service for us, and what makes it distinctive is that it's not just the entertainment side of CBC that's streaming on GEM, but all of our news is streaming on GEM. Our local news is streaming, our national news is streaming, and we are continuing to experiment with putting more content up there. Sometimes now our radio and other audio offerings are on GEM, so it's becoming a full, inclusive service of all CBC programming for those that prefer to get their content through a stream. We are also having huge success with podcasts. It's been a burgeoning business for us, and we are world leaders in podcasts, everything from our daily front burner through to international co-pros that we've done with other public broadcasters around the world. 20 million downloads every month of CBC podcasts. It's huge. And people are finding that on our Listen app, which is another one of the platforms that is streaming really for audio, where people are discovering their content. A lot of our radio, which is so powerful for CBC, is really being consumed on the Listen app now, not on the transistor radio on your kitchen counter anymore, but very, very much still enjoyed as a powerful piece of the content offering from CBC. We are making sure that we are growing locally because the local proximity piece that Catherine referenced is so critical. So just this week, we announced 7 brand new local podcasts that will be offered from the local communities that are being offered to communities that maybe don't have as much specific local information for themselves. These local podcasts will be driving that initiative. So it's all about meeting audiences where they are, giving them the kind of content they expect on the platforms that they're now using. And CBC, to an earlier point, is absolutely a growing, relevant service for more and more Canadians all the time. And one last point, the emergency service piece of what we offer, when there's a flood, when there's a fire, when there's a huge storm, Nothing like CBC to ensure that people are getting the accurate information they need in the moment, and that's where something like radio still really is one of the most prominent services that we can offer to support Canadians in their times of need.
Thank you. And I just want to switch back to Ms. Tate, switching gears a little bit. I think there's been a lot of assertions being made about how bonuses are paid, how people are appointed, and all of these, I think that there is a desire to politicize the CBC. There is a desire, I think, on the part of some to make it seem like the hands of government get to decide what the CBC does. So when it comes to things like GIC appointments that involve the CBC, is that a political process or is that managed by the bureaucracy itself?
In the case of my appointment, I'm the only GIC appointment at CBC Radio-Canada, and I was appointed in a merit-based process by an independent committee that is assembled, and by the way, such a committee is being assembled now to identify the person who will replace me, and I competed for the job along with probably many others from the industry, and the recommendation from that committee was made to the government.
So just for avoidance of doubt, you weren't sitting in some smoky back room. A minister came up to you and said, "Hey, Catherine, we're going to offer you this job if you do A, B, and C on the part of the government."
15 seconds, Mr. Mohammed.
No.
No. So this was a merit-based process. You were chosen independently, and no one from government just plopped you into this role, correct?
Absolutely not.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Now I'll go to Martin, 2.5 minutes, and of course everybody seems to be. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Merci.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question about the mandate of CBC and Radio-Canada. It's about to be re-examined. Your mandate will come to an end in about a year. And work will be difficult. And for those that will have to review CBC and Radio-Canada's mandate, what should they keep in mind? That is a big question, and we only have 2 minutes. So there's one thing that needs to be looked at, and that's the business model. Do we want a well-funded broadcaster? Are we ready to invest in an essential service for the future of democracy in this country? That is the question. What is the will for investing in this broadcaster? I would always defend good information, and I would like to have representative opinions from Quebec and from Canada. And if we look at the mandate and the obligations and the responsibilities of CBC and Radio-Canada, what should we focus on in the mandate? Things that might have changed since the mandate was last reviewed. I believe that the mandate can be defended. It does not need to be changed. It needs to continue to inform Canadians and keep them entertained. But I think that the role of the public broadcaster as an innovator is important because, and as we saw, there's a system based on the internet. We had a protocol system that was the first. I know that my Conservative colleagues might not agree, but do you believe that CBC and Radio-Canada should receive more public funding and get rid of the ad revenue? I agree with the first part of your question, but we still need to examine the role that Radio-Canada plays, especially in Quebec, because it does have an important impact on Quebec's economy. And so before removing that ad revenue, I think we would need to examine the impact on the market.
Peter? 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you. I spoke in my opening statement about the quality of CBC journalism, and that's certainly, I think, something I've experienced across the country, that there is a remarkable level of professionalism of CBC journalists, hundreds of awards, both domestically and internationally. My conservative colleagues who want to basically kill everything that's not from the far right have suggested that 100 corrections is excessive. How many reports, articles, stories would you do in the course of a year?
Hundreds of thousands.
Yes. So, and is
on all platforms. Don't forget, we're reporting on radio, television, digital.
So, is 100 corrections? Is that a valid number of the hundreds of thousands of different reports that are issued?
I'm not sure where the 100 corrections came from, so honestly, I can't say whether that's a correct number. But I would say that the number of corrections is not an outrageous one.
No, I would agree. And I contrast that with the Fox Disinformation Network. It doesn't issue corrections. They put out falsehoods, deliberate lies, and they stick to it. Of course, with Fox, there is a mechanism, and that is the court system. Now, Fox has paid well over $1 billion now in libel lawsuits from false information, impugning a whole range of people and organizations and corporations. It is part of their business model. They say outrageous things, and then they try to block the lawsuits. They've been very unsuccessful in blocking those lawsuits and paid out massive amounts. How many dollars over the last year has CBC had to pay in libel lawsuits, in court-ordered payments, compared to the Fox, part of the Fox business model?
Well, certainly we have not paid out billions of dollars in lawsuits. We do have, and we'd have to get back to you on whether or not that's public information. It may be something that we disclose in our public documents. We do have funds set aside for defamation cases and to protect our journalism, and that's an important, by the way, another important role of the public broadcaster. We have fought many very critical lawsuits to protect the freedom of the press and the integrity of the press in a number of instances. But the actual precise number on an annual basis, I don't have at hand.
Would it be fair to say, in part, it's because you already have a process in place. You issue corrections if something turns out to not be true. You have the CBC ombudsperson that even the public. Anybody, you don't have to have deep pockets and employ lawyers. You don't have to be a billionaire. If something is incorrect in CBC, you endeavor to correct it and make it right. And this is something that my conservative colleagues don't seem to understand about journalism, that issuing a correction is actually a sign of strength in journalism. And the Fox Disinformation Network approach, where if you're a billionaire, you can sue them and eventually get justice, is simply not a model that we should be using. So would you not say that the CBC has put into place a whole series of tools that somebody in my riding can use if there is information that is not true?
And I would say, in addition to that, the comment about CBC, Radio-Canada, and being a trusted network, in those media surveys, CBC Radio-Canada still ranks as the most trusted source of news in this country. Yes, numbers have come down because social media is dragging all of the media down. But the reality is we are still number one in terms of trust.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Ms. Thomas now for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tate, I'm just curious, what study is that based on?
That's the Gustafson report from the University of Victoria.
Okay. And what's the sample size?
Yeah, I'd have to check on that.
And how is the study completed?
They do it every year.
Okay. It just differs from other studies that have been done that show that trust in the CBC is actually one of the worst trust levels out of any media company in the country. So I just want to make sure that that is juxtaposed.
I think you would want to look at the good stuff in there. It's a university of...
Sorry, Chair, I'll just ask the witness not to interrupt me or speak over me.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, Ms. Tate, you made mention before. Actually, sorry, this will be my question. I'm curious if you've hired any consultants during your time as CEO.
Over the 6 years that I've been at CBC Radio-Canada, I personally do not hire consultants. I don't have a budget for that, but certainly in the company there have been consultants, yes.
Okay. Were consultants used to come to the determination that 800 jobs needed to be cut?
No.
Okay, so that determination was made on your own?
It was made as a result of an analysis of our financial situation, the structural deficit that we were facing with the management team that you have before you, but also our CFO and others that aren't at the table, yes.
Ultimately, who makes the recommendation that 800 jobs be cut?
I take full responsibility for that decision.
Okay, thank you. And ultimately, who makes the final recommendation with regards to performance awards?
That's a more complex process, as I've described. We have a very rigorous, transparent, measured approach that is presented to the board of it goes to the board of directors, and they ultimately.
But who makes that recommendation to the board of directors?
The entire management team.
The entire management team.
Correct.
On the CBC website, it says you do, Ms. Tate.
The entire management team. I don't make decisions alone. I have a fabulous team that I work with.
I wonder if you would consider correcting that error on the website then.
We could.
Will you?
We'll take it under consideration.
You do that. Perhaps you can report back to this committee your final decision, yes?
Yes.
Perfect. Now, Ms. Tate, you've made it clear here at this committee that you intend to recommend bonuses for executives, and you've asserted that you yourself deserve a bonus this year. And so,
point of order, Madam Chair. Sorry, just want to make sure that when questions are being asked, they're not only not mischaracterizing what the witness has said, but also that they are factual in nature if they're making representations of what the witness has said.
I agree, Mr. Nur Mohammed. Please be careful.
Yes, point of order, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Thomas should issue a correction on the false information.
You can ask your questions. You're given your time. I don't like the tone. I might even say that it's veering on an area where I don't think is appropriate at all for you to be speaking to someone like that, Mr. Julian. It's offensive and unnecessary.
Mr. Lawrence, I'm sorry, that's out of order. Let's continue, please.
So, Ms. Tate, you've put it on the record here today that bonuses are not ruled out. That it would be your opportunity to recommend them. And you've referred to the KPIs as being your guide. You have also asserted that you deserve a bonus as well. When I asked you directly, you said yes. Actually, and so I'm moving a motion at this point in time, looking for UC from the committee. And the motion is that no later than April 1st, 2024, the CBC would provide the committee with the number of executive bonuses given and the monetary amount of each for the fiscal year of 2023.
Sorry, Ms. Thomas, I was speaking with the clerk.
I noticed.
Yes.
So I moved a motion. I'll read it into the record again.
Please.
So, that no later than April 1st, 2024, the CBC provide the committee with the number of executive bonuses given and the monetary amount of each for the fiscal year 2023. I'm seeking consent from the committee to have this motion accepted.
I need unanimous consent from the committee. Mr. Cotto?
Can I ask a question? I'm allowed to ask a question on a motion?
Yes, absolutely.
Is that information public?
We do not release individual information because of we are guided by the Privacy Act. We release information in aggregate.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, Chair, I'm not asking for a name or for an identification number. Just asking for the number of bonuses given and the amount of each.
Now, I need to know, Mr. Nuamed?
Sorry, just on this point, Madam Chair, I have sort of two things I'd like to clarify. One is, in fact, is that information that is ordinarily provided to the public, and is that something the CBC would, under statute, be allowed to provide, number one? And number two, when would that determination be made so that, if it's not done at that point, or if it's not organized at that point, if Ms. Tate CBC were to do this, would it be something that would already be prepared, or would they have to do this in order to support the committee's work?
May I answer the question?
Yes.
We actually, the end of the fiscal year is March 31st, so we take some time to do the assessment, and normally we would present the results to the board in our board meeting in June.
Thank you. We have 1 more minute, 2 more minutes left in the meeting, and I'm just going to ask if there's unanimous consent, as Ms. Thomas asked, from the committee to place a motion.
No.
No,
There's
fine.
not.
Well, there's no unanimous consent, so
No
I'm sorry.
problem. Then I guess we go to a vote then. And I'll ask for it to be a recorded vote.
And can I ask another question before we go? I had my hand up.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Cotto.
So I'm under the impression, how do we have all this data? Like I open up the news and I'm reading, a report and it says that this much bonuses has gone out to this many people. Like, it seems like we have, like, how do we get that information? I know that you don't connect it to a name, but the information that the member's asking for seems to be available already.
Ask through access to information, and we've provided that information upon request, yes.
Anyway, it's moot because the motion has not been accepted by the committee. And Ms. Thomas has called for a vote. Thank you.
We'd like to move the motion then, and we're going to record a vote. It says.
Yes, we're going to record votes. Those in favor of dealing with the motion. So go ahead, clerk.
The vote is on the motion moved by Ms. Thomas. Mr. Coteau.
Sure, point of order, Madam Chair. Can we circulate the motion so we can read it, please?
Here.
There was questions. We haven't seen the motion in writing.
Well, you don't have to see it in writing, but maybe you can read it again, Ms. Thomas.
You can't. It's against.
Yeah, it's been called.
It's been called.
Have you got it with you? Have you got the motion?
And the process here, there were some other questions I think people had before we went to a vote. Is there an opportunity to ask questions, or
No, we're going to a vote right now, and we have to record the vote.
Rappel au règlement, Madame la Présidente, le vote a été demandé.
This is a point of order. Point of order.
No, there are no points of order.
No point of order. We'll just go to a vote, please, because the vote is called.
The vote has been called.
Yes. Please.
Just because the vote was called doesn't mean we go right to the vote. Is that how it works?
Let's go to the vote, please. It's been called. And it's a recorded vote. Clerk, please.
The vote is on the motion that was moved by Ms. Thomas. Mr. Coteau.
No.
Ms. Dillon.
No.
Madame Guinea.
No.
Ms. Hefner. No. Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Nope.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Ms. Gladue.
Yes.
Monsieur Berthold.
Oui.
Mr. Philip.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Sorry, Mr. Phillips, great.
Mr. Lawrence. Monsieur Chaput.
No.
And Mr. Julian.
No.
So there is no consent for this motion to be discussed. So now, it being 30 minutes after, and we now have the room for that hard stop, I want to thank the witnesses for being here and spending 2 hours answering questions. And I want to thank the committee for being as respectful as we could be, which I'm glad to see us doing. And so I want to say this meeting is now adjourned.